Hey guys, my name is Shreyas and welcome to Simple Chemistry. In this video, we're going to be talking about two important properties of substances in more depth. We already talked about temperature in the previous video, but we're going to go more into depth on what temperature is, and we're also going to be talking about another important thing you need to know, density. So let's get right into it. So there's a common misconception about temperature. You know, when you think about temperature, you might define it as, oh, how hot or how cold something is. But really in science, what temperature is temperature is the measure of the average movement of the particles in the substance. So what does that mean? So believe it or not, all the atoms that make up matter are in constant motion. You are in constant motion. The device you're watching this on are in constant motion. Well, even though you can't see it, the atoms which make up everything, they're constantly vibrating. Now, because of that, that property is called temperature, essentially. So substances which are hot or substances which have a high temperature, their particles, which make them up, are moving very, very fast. However, substances which are cold and substances which have a low temperature, their particles are moving slow. Okay, so that's all that temperature is. Now, we talked about in the previous video how temperature can be measured in two different ways, Kelvin and Celsius. Now let's talk about how we convert between those two units. So if we wanted to find the Kelvin temperature from the Celsius temperature, what we do is we take the Kelvin temperature, also known as the absolute temperature. You take the Celsius temperature and subtract 273 from that in order to get the Kelvin temperature, or the absolute temperature, same thing. If you want to find the Celsius temperature from the Kelvin temperature, we take the Kelvin temperature, or the absolute temperature, same thing, and add 273. Now, important thing to know is that Kelvin is not measured in degrees. So let's say we're talking about the weather outside, or room temperature. Room temperature is typically 25 degrees Celsius. That degrees is that little tiny circle next to the C. However, when we're talking about Kelvin temperature, we don't say degrees Kelvin, we just say Kelvin. And also, you might be wondering, why do we even use this? You know, Kelvin and Celsius. Why can't we stick with one? The thing is, at 0 Kelvin, the movement of particles ceases to exist. So essentially, at 0 Kelvin, that's the lowest temperature that there is. It's the coldest temperature possible. And because of that, scientists use Kelvin in order to kind of like scale the Celsius temperature to Kelvin. Okay? The Celsius temperature is scaled to water because at 0 degrees Celsius, water freezes. The Kelvin temperature is scaled to 0 Kelvin, where there is no temperature at all, the lowest temperature that is possible. So you're never going to see a negative Kelvin, okay? All Kelvin temperatures are always positive. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some practice here, converting between Kelvin and Celsius. So let's convert 25 degrees Celsius to Kelvin. So in this case, to convert 25 degrees Celsius to Kelvin, we're going to have to add 273. So if you wanted to do that, 273 plus 25 is going to give us 298 Kelvin. Okay, so notice that I did not put a degrees up here. I just put 298 K, and we read this as 298 Kelvin. Here, convert negative 100 degrees Celsius to Kelvin. To do that, 273 plus negative 100, which is just, subtracting 100. And that's going to give us 173 Kelvin. Okay? Again, not degrees Kelvin, just Kelvin. Now let's go the other way. Convert 100 Kelvin to degrees Celsius. So here we're going to have to subtract 273. So 100 minus 273, that's equal to negative 173 degrees Celsius. Okay. And here, again, if you want to convert 550 Kelvin to degrees Celsius, let's do that. 550 minus 273. Let me write that clearer. 550 minus 273, and if you do the math here, 7, 4, 10, okay, 7, 2, let me make sure that's right. Alright, so 277 degrees Celsius. Alright, pretty simple. If you want to convert from Kelvin to Celsius, add 273. If you want to convert from, if you want to convert from Celsius to Kelvin, add 273. If you want to convert from Kelvin to Celsius, subtract 273. Pretty simple. Now, density is a measure of the amount of mass in a specific amount of volume. So, it's the units we use is grams per milliliter, typically. If you kind of try to visualize this, density is the amount of mass in a specific amount of volume, so that's why we have grams per milliliter. Grams measures mass, milliliter measures volume, so that's where the unit comes from. A milliliter, by the way, 1,000 milliliters are in 1 liter, if you didn't know that. And different substances have different densities, obviously. So water, the density of water is about 1 gram per milliliter, and the density of solids is going to be higher, the density of gases is going to be lower. Okay. Now, sometimes you're going to be asked to work with density, and because density gives you the ratio between the amount of mass and the volume a substance has, it's a conversion factor, really. So here, we have given the density of substance is 2 grams per milliliter, and we want to find the mass given the volume. So in this case, when we want to do that, when we want to find the mass given the volume, pay attention, mass given the volume, and we're given the density, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to multiply the volume by the density. Okay, multiply. So let's go ahead and do that. So 2 grams per milliliter times 35 milliliters, and that will give us 70 grams. Okay. Now, if we're given the density and we want to find, if we're given the mass here and we wanted to find the volume, we're going to have to divide the mass by the density. Okay. Again, pay attention. If you're given the mass, you're trying to find the volume, and you're given the density, divide the mass by the volume. So 90 grams divided by 5 grams per milliliter, and that'll give us 18 milliliters. Now finally, I don't have a practice problem here for this, but if you're given the volume and the mass of a substance, you're going to, in order to calculate the density, simple, you just divide the mass by the volume, and that will give you the density. Okay? That's all you have to know about density and temperature for now. Stay in tune for more videos. We're going to be talking about more interesting things. But that's it for now. Temperature and density are as simple as that.